Welcome back, focused learners. I am incredibly excited to have you here today. Acting as your personal Dr. Chem, I'm going to walk you through a complete step-by-step explainer on the classic 1951 Lowry method for protein quantification. We're not just, skimming the surface here. We're giving you the complete experiment with full necessary experimental details. Whether you're literally prepping to hit the lab bench or you just appreciate the pure elegance of chemical assays, this one's for sure going to be a masterclass. Okay, let's just quickly run through our roadmap for this explainer. First, the two-step biochemical principle. Second, reagents and standard curve. Third, the step-by-step lab protocol. Fourth, data analysis and quantification. And finally, number 5, avoiding common interferences.
Right, jumping into section 1, the two-step biochemical principle, the chemical reactions under the microscope.
So, first described way back in 1951 by Oliver H. Lowry and his team, the Lowry method is a highly sensitive colorimetric assay. And that word colorimetric is the real key here. It literally means we're measuring the concentration of a substance just by analyzing how intense its color is. By combining a classic copper reduction, which you probably know as the Biuret reaction, with the reduction of a really specific chemical called the Folin Ciocalteu reagent, this assay produces a super vivid blue color. It's incredibly sensitive too, actually capable of detecting protein concentrations as low as 5 to 10 micrograms per milliliter. No way you're eyeballing that without some chemical help. Now, let's think about exactly how that magic happens right in your test tube. In step 1, we introduce our protein, which of course contains peptide bonds, to copper 2+ ions in an alkaline or basic environment. Those peptide bonds basically grab onto or chelate the copper, reducing it down to copper 1+ and forming this really faint light blue complex. But honestly, that's just not sensitive enough on its own. So we move to step 2. We add the Folin Ciocalteu reagent, which is this complex mixture of phosphomolybdate and phosphotungstate. And here's the cool part. That newly formed copper protein complex reduces the Folin reagent, triggering a massive, dramatic color shift into a deep, dark blue. But wait, it's actually not just the peptide backbone doing all the heavy lifting. The sheer intensity of that beautiful blue color is heavily driven by the presence of specific amino acids buried within your protein. Tyrosine and tryptophan, they're the primary contributors here. They're the ones actively reducing the Folin reagent. Cysteine and histidine pitch in as well, but as secondary contributors. And since different proteins obviously have totally different amounts of these specific amino acids, the exact shade of blue can actually vary slightly from protein to protein. That is absolutely a crucial detail you'll want to remember for later.
Okay, moving right along to section 2, reagents and standard curve, setting up the lab bench.
Right, so on our actual bench, we need 3 critical components. First up, the alkaline copper solution. This is a super precise mixture of sodium carbonate, cupric sulfate, and sodium potassium tartrate, and you generally want to prepare this fresh daily. Second, the famous Folin Ciocalteu's phenol reagent. Straight out of the bottle, it's kind of this yellow-greenish solution, but here is a massive warning for you. This reagent is highly light-sensitive and degrades over time. You literally have to protect it from light, and it's typically diluted with water right before you actually use it. Finally, we have our known standard, which is almost always bovine serum albumin, or BSA. Now, before we even think about testing our unknown sample, we absolutely have to create a baseline, right? Like a ruler to measure our results against. We do this by building a standard curve. We take our known BSA stock and just super carefully dilute it with buffer to create a series of standards. Standard 1 is our blank, 0 protein, purely just buffer. Then we incrementally ramp up the protein concentration all the way to 300 micrograms per milliliter. The key here is we'll run the assay on these known standards at the exact same time as our unknown sample.
All right, section 3, step-by-step lab protocol, executing the physical assay. So, the make-or-break moment is following these steps with absolute unyielding precision. Step 1, we pipette 1 milliliter of our protein sample, or those BSA standards we just talked about, and mix it with 5 milliliters of the alkaline copper solution. Step 2, we wait. Just a 10-minute incubation at room temperature to let that initial Biuret reaction fully finish. Step 3, we rapidly add half a milliliter of our freshly diluted Folin reagent and vortex the whole thing immediately. Step 4, we incubate again, but this time for 30 minutes in the dark to let that deep blue color completely develop. And finally, step 5, we measure exactly how much light the blue liquid absorbs at around 650 to 750 nanometers.
I really want to pause and emphasize step 3. Why on earth must we mix the Folin reagent so rapidly? Well, it all comes down to chemical stability. You see, the Folin reagent is highly acidic, which is exactly what keeps it stable in its dark stock bottle. But our reaction tube, that's full of an alkaline, highly basic copper solution. The absolute second the Folin reagent hits that basic environment, it starts to degrade. So if you hesitate, even for a few seconds, and don't mix it instantly, the reagent will literally break down before it even has a chance to react with the protein. And bam, your color development is completely ruined.
Let's transition to Section 4, Data Analysis and Quantification, Decoding the Blue Liquid.
So here's the fundamental challenge of basically all colorimetric assays. How do we take a tube of blue liquid and magically turn it into an exact, reproducible mathematical number? We obviously can't just eyeball it, right? We need a solid, reliable bridge between human perception and hard data.
To solve this, we rely on a spectrophotometer. This is a machine that shines a specific wavelength of light right through the liquid and measures exactly how much of that light gets absorbed. Basically, the darker the blue, the higher the absorbance. We then take the absorbance values of our known BSA standards and plot them on the y-axis against their known concentrations on the x-axis. This gives us our trend line. So when we measure the absorbance of our unknown sample, we simply find that specific number on the y-axis, trace it horizontally over to our line, and then drop straight down to the x-axis. Boom! There's your exact protein concentration.
But hold on. Before you draw that line and start calculating, you absolutely must follow this cardinal rule of data analysis. You have to subtract the blank. Remember standard 1, the one with absolutely no protein in it? Well, it might still show a tiny bit of absorbance just from the chemicals reacting with themselves. That's just background noise. You literally have to subtract that blank absorbance value from every single one of your other readings to get the true net absorbance. If you skip this step, you're going to artificially inflate all of your protein counts, and your data will be completely off.
Moving into Section 5, Avoiding Common Interferences, Troubleshooting and Alternative Assays.
Look, choosing an assay is always a bit of a balancing act. The Lowry method is amazingly sensitive, yes, but it is notoriously susceptible to chemical interference from a lot of common laboratory buffers. If we compare it to another famous option, like the Bradford method, the trade-offs become really clear. Bradford is way faster. We're talking 5 to 15 minutes, and it completely doesn't mind reducing agents. But it absolutely hates detergents and shows wild variation depending on the specific protein you're using. Lowry, on the other hand, takes about 40 minutes and pretty much hates everything else. But it gives you incredible precision as long as your buffer is clean. Let's take a closer look at what I like to call the Lowry assay villains. If your protein is happily swimming in a buffer containing DTT or beta-mercaptoethanol, watch out. These reducing agents will artificially interact with the assay and ruin your reading. Detergents like STS or Triton X100, they can actually cause precipitation. Then you have EDTA, which is a chelator. Its entire purpose in life is to steal metals, meaning it will literally steal the copper right out of your reaction. Even super common buffers like tris or ammonium salts can severely suppress that beautiful blue color response.
And understanding those villains brings us directly to the golden rule of assay design. If you have a small amount of some interfering substance in your sample that you just can't dialyze away or remove, you absolutely must prepare your standard curve in the exact same buffer. Think about it. If your unknown protein has, say, 1% of a detergent in it, your BSA standards need to be mixed with 1% of that exact same detergent. This perfectly equalizes the artificial background noise across both the standards and the samples, basically canceling out the air entirely.
Now, today, while the core wet chemistry hasn't really changed since 1951, the tools we use to read it have evolved drastically. For instance, take the modern NanoDrop 1 spectrophotometer. Instead of filling up those huge, clunky cuvettes, this machine lets you use microscopic drop volumes of your sample, and honestly, better yet, the onboard software automatically plots the standard curve, subtracts the blink for you, and calculates all the interpolations. It really is this perfect marriage of mid-century chemical brilliance and 21st century computational power.
Which actually brings us to a really compelling final thought. We've seen exactly how intricate and hands-on the Lowry method truly is. But as automated, microvolume technologies continue to rapidly advance, and all these alternative directoried assays keep emerging, will classic, multi-step bench chemistry protocols like the Lowry method remain the gold standard? Or are these beautiful blue tubes ultimately destined to become just a nostalgic chapter in laboratory history? Well, something to think about. Thank you so much for joining me in the lab today for this explainer. Keep asking those great questions, and I'll catch you next time.